A regional vote, but also a test for India's Prime Minister and his governing BJP party. Narendra Modi stands accused of being divisive. So how will these state elections shape his political future? And what will that mean for democracy in India? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Kim Vinell. Millions of people in India will be voting in state elections this week and until March the 7th. Ballots will be cast across 5 states. Among them, the most populous, Uttar Pradesh. Results there are seen as a referendum on Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his governing BJP party, indicating how people may vote during the next national elections. Opposition parties are trying to capitalise on the BJP's decline in popularity caused by 3 farming laws that triggered protests for more than a year. Fatima Mittal sent us this report from Uttar Pradesh.
We're outside a polling station in Amroha in Uttar Pradesh where people are lining up to cast their vote in India's biggest state election. Now Uttar Pradesh is home to more than 200 million people and sends the highest number of members to India's parliament and therefore has an outsized importance in India's political landscape. This election is widely seen as a test of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's popularity. Now this is an agrarian state which backed the BJP overwhelmingly in 2017, but since then support among farmers has dwindled. For one, many of them participated in that year-long agitation against the 3 farm laws they said favoured big corporations. Now those laws were eventually revoked by the Prime Minister because of these upcoming elections, but many farmers have continued to protest over unmet demands. Other financial issues like price rise and unemployment are also playing out in these polls. It's not just Uttar Pradesh, 4 other states in India are also holding elections this month. Results for all will be out on March 10th. Analysts say that the BJP does continue to be a favourite and will watch out for the victory margin in the state of Uttar Pradesh. I'm Fatima Mittal for Inside Story.
OK, we'll begin our discussion in a moment. But first, let's bring you up to date with India's journey so far under Narendra Modi and the Hindu nationalist BJP. Modi became Prime Minister with an historic landslide victory in national general elections in 2014. He was soon accused of trying to silence opposition after activists and journalists critical of the government began being arrested. In 2019, Modi was re-elected. He then imposed a widespread crackdown and a lockdown on the disputed region of Kashmir and revoked its semi-autonomous status. That same year, protests erupted nationwide after Modi enacted a controversial citizenship law that provided citizenship for religious minorities but excluded Muslims. In 2020, farming reform law was passed. It prompted months-long peaceful protests and strikes, which sometimes turned violent. In recent months, the BJP has been accused of allowing hate speech against Muslims in its rallies and polarising the country. Last January, BJP-controlled states began imposing a ban on religious headscarves worn by Muslims in schools. All right, let's bring in our guests in New Delhi. We have Sudhanshu Mittal, a politician and senior leader in the Bharatiya Janata party, the BJP. In Kochi, Thulasi, a lawyer at the Supreme Court of India and Kerala High Court. And in Lucknow, Fatima, a journalist at the Quint. Thank you very much for joining us. Warm welcome to the programme. I'd like to start with you, Sudhanshu Mittal. If these elections are a referendum on Narendra Modi, who's halfway through his term, and on the ruling BJP, of which you are a part, how do you feel it's going to go?
Yeah, I don't think it's a referendum on Mr. Narendra Modi. He's ruling the country. He's the Prime Minister. This is a referendum on the rule of Mr. Adityanath Yogi, who's the Chief Minister of that state, who was elected, who has been at the helm of affairs for the last 5 years. So to call it a referendum on Mr. Modi is an exaggeration. UP is a very, very critical state. The population of UP is more than 225 million people, which is huge, and it actually accounts for 1/6 of the number of parliament seats. So yes, it's very critical. But the critical issue this time, before people, when they make the choices, is the earlier government led by Akhilesh Yadav of a party called Samajwadi Party epitomized gundagardi, which is the most jungle raj. It is the manifestation of the criminality perpetrated by a section of people with official patronage. That is what people saw for the last 5 years. And that is when they chose and decided to opt for BJP. The reason was that one particular religious community and one particular caste had dominance over the law and order machinery there. So every police station had a majority of these people. You could not file cases against them. Their writ ran large. They would abduct people. They would, just enter the fields and take over the land, claiming their ownership. That the women were not safe. Anybody could be abducted or people could be beaten up at their mercy. So that fearful environment necessitated the people to opt for a government which will bring peace and tranquility and which will eliminate the mafia raj.
Okay.
The rule of the mafia, the rule of the criminals.
I hear what you're saying.
The accomplishment of this government.
I hear what you're saying,
right.
And I just want to clarify for our international audience. When we talk about UP, we're talking about Uttar Pradesh. I'd like to cross over to you just for your response, Fatima Khan. Obviously, you're a journalist. You're covering the run-up to these elections. Do you think that these are a litmus test for the Prime Minister?
I do think it is a litmus test for the BJP as a whole. These elections, they come right on the heels of a number of historic events that have taken place in the country in the last couple of years alone. The farmers' protest that you mentioned, 13-month-long farmers' protest, where several farmers from different parts of North India, they sat at the peripheries of the national capital protesting against the BJP. Remember, the farmers had voted in a huge chunk, a huge majority of farmers had voted for the BJP in the previous UP elections, as well as the 2019 polls. So for the farmers to sit and mobilize themselves against the BJP was a huge matter. Of course, we cannot forget the COVID second wave, which ravaged through multiple states. Uttar Pradesh alone saw multiple deaths, multiple casualties because of a complete infrastructural collapse under the BJP. And at that time, of course, it was being said that if nothing, this will be the downfall of the BJP. Of course, I've been covering these elections for the last 2 months now. I've been on the field. And I can tell you the BJP does continue to remain hugely popular, notwithstanding, of course, the fact that there are people who continue to have their grievances. So ultimately, this, if I have to put it simplistically, I'd say that it is a matter of choice that the voters have to take between, the appeal of Hindutva, the brand of Hindutva that Prime Minister Modi and the BJP have popularized across the country, versus more material issues that they might have faced, whether vis-a-vis, be it with the farm laws or the COVID wave or just generally price rise, infrastructural issues, anything that you would consider in any other scenario would be enough reason to bring down a government.
I'd like to cross over to Kochi, and I do see you there as well, Mr. Mittal. We will come back to you shortly. But first, I'd like to go to Thulasi Raj in Kochi. We spoke there about some of the issues at play. You've written about hate speech, and there is rising Hindu nationalist sentiment across the country, right? There have been protests in one state about the decision to ban the wearing of the Muslim headscarf in educational settings. So you believe the role of the courts is more important than ever. Talk us through that and what your assessment is.
Sure. Thank you so much for the question, and congratulations on speaking and organizing a debate on a very important issue, which in fact the world is watching. I would, in fact, think that the Islamophobia that is launched by the right-wing government, which is led by Modi, has been widespread. It's been also incremental. If we look at how the nature of Islamophobia emerged, we will see that in the beginning, the attempt was to consider or treat Muslims as second-class citizens. So that's what we have seen with the Citizenship Amendment Act in 2019, by which they said that citizenship will be extended to all communities outside India except for Muslims. Muslims were ineligible to apply for citizenship in the country. Therefore, we saw an incremental process of converting actual citizens to second-class citizenship, and from that we have come to a situation where there is an open call for genocide against Muslims, and that's precisely what happened in Haridwar, in an Indian city, in December. That a group of so-called saints assembled, and they said that India should be a Hindu state, and they said that whatever should be done in their capacity to transform India into a Hindu state. And there were references made to the genocide that occurred in Myanmar against the Rohingya refugees. Therefore, this is the political context in which we are talking about, and this is a very scary and very intimidating socio-political context for Indian Muslims.
How does the law deal with that kind of rhetoric?
Yes, it's been quite interesting to see that the law and order situation in India, in various states, has been dealing with it quite poorly. For example, the genocide call, which was made in December, there was no registration of FIR, which is essentially the first information report, which means the registering of a crime. That is the initial registering of a crime with the police. That has not happened until recent calls were done, and there was an enormous public pressure on the police to actually register a crime. And even while registering the crime, important provisions of the Indian Penal Code were left out of this registration, and only very few provisions were actually charged against the saints who, in fact, made an open call for genocide.
Okay.
And coming back to your question as to how the constitutional courts were dealing with it, I would think that the idea of a constitutional court is to essentially be counter-majoritarian, to resist these kind of majoritarian atrocities against the minorities. And I do not think that the Indian Supreme Court or the high courts in the country has been dealing quite actively with it. They've been adopting very broadly, of course, this is a very broad generalizing statement. They've been dealing with it quite passively and quite indifferently. And in many occasions, we've seen courts taking blankly the side of the executive.
All right, Sudhanshu, Mittal, I can see you wanting to jump in there. Go ahead.
It's the most vicious and untruthful statement I've ever heard. Let me start with the first. The Citizen Amendment Act. Here it says it denies the Muslims citizenship of this country. You're completely wrong and untrue. For the simple reason, this act was enacted for protecting the minorities of theocratic states, which have been persecuted and compelled to leave their countries. Now, which are the theocratic states? Pakistan is a theocratic state which has got a Muslim majority. The persecution of the religious minorities of Pakistan, when they come to India, we said we will protect them. Afghanistan, when they come to India, we said we will protect them. So it is all states which are theocratic states ruled by a majority which happens to be Muslims. And there, the religious minorities, when persecuted and when they come to India, including Bangladesh, that is when they're given the citizenship. Now, if a majority, if a member of a majority of a theocratic state comes and seeks citizenship, is he religiously persecuted? No. So this is giving citizenship to religiously persecuted minorities by a theocratic state.
I hear you.
Now,
what I don't want to do is jump
Right.
into a retrospective of that issue of the time, because what we're talking about is how this was received by the Indian population and how that is going to translate into the elections. That is what we want to talk about.
So let's talk about the elections. The rhetoric which you've heard from the previous two speakers has been to sow hatred among religious communities, saying Muslims are angry with the Hindu-dominated state. You will realize that this state has not discriminated against the Hindus or the Muslims. Show me one example where the government of the day has said this is what is available to a religious majority and this is not what is available to a religious minority.
I think
nothing at all.
I think everybody here agrees with the everybody here seems to agree with polarization. But I can see over in Lucknow, Fatima Khan, I can see you wanting to jump in, and I think it's crucial that we ensure everybody has the right of reply and that we keep this even. Please go ahead, Fatima Khan in Lucknow.
Yes, a number of things. For one, I'd quickly like to address that when we talk about CAA, Mr. Mittal has gone on and on about the number of states whose religiously persecuted minorities will be allowed citizenship in India. I'd like to ask him, what about Rohingya Muslims? Myanmar is also a neighbor. Will Rohingya Muslims be allowed citizenship in the country? Secondly, the fact that we can even, I don't think it's even, it even merits a debate at this point of time, whether or not Yogi Adityanath runs a majoritarian government. I think it is a given. I think BJP office bearers who I speak to on the daily basis have acknowledged it in so many words. Just to give you one example, he was asking for an example, and I'll give you one. Yogi Adityanath, the chief minister, in his election rallies over and over again, he's used rhetoric to explicitly say that he will bring in Hindu Rashtra, meaning a Hindu nation. He's explicitly said that there is a fight between 80% versus 20%, a dog whistle against Muslim minorities. He's explicitly said that so far UP has only had a government that is focused on Qabristan. Qabristan is Urdu for graveyard. He's repeatedly used dog whistle, anti-Muslim dog whistle, over and over again in so many words. He will not deny it. So I do not understand why Mr. Mittal stands here tonight and denies it.
Okay.
Second of all, I think just going back on the elections, I think it is important to understand that communalism and hate have been normalized in this state. And if Yogi Adityanath comes back to power, and there is a huge possibility that he will, I will not deny the fact that he continues to be hugely popular among the masses here. And if he does come back to power here, it will be a signal sent out to several other states in the country that this kind of politics is acceptable, normalized, and will be celebrated.
Tulsi K. Raj, I want to come over to you. Has the opposition, those in opposition to the BJP, have they capitalised on, some of the frustrations that might be there?
It's an important question at that. And I think the opposition, unfortunately, has not been able to consolidate effectively against the right-wing Hindu rhetoric that is being pushed forward. And I think there is considerable potential for the opposition parties in the country to come together and form coalitions in all the 5 states in which upcoming elections, and in fact, polls have begun in some of them. And there is tremendous potential for that. But unfortunately, I would think that the potential is not being fully made use of, including by the Congress party, which in fact is the largest oppositional party in the national scenario. And that is, in fact, one of the reasons why the BJP and the allies, including the RSS, are able to come forward and are able to push the rhetoric of hate in the country. It is partly the failure of the opposition, and partly it is the failure of the populace. I think a country where there has been quite a large amount of socioeconomic backwardness, quite a large amount of illiteracy, is unable to, I think, to a great extent see the dangers of a Hindu majority party, and the kind of principles they're trying to sow, and they're somewhat being blinded by the promise of development, by the promise of betterment, and by the promise of projecting India to be one of the world leading countries of economy. The promises of a $1 trillion economy, when India still remains, according to Oxfam and other findings, remains as one of the most unequal countries in the world, where there is so much inequality that thrives. The attempt is to sort of hide that. The attempt is to not address these socioeconomic inequalities.
Okay.
But the attempt is rather to project India as a leading world economy, which it clearly is not.
Okay. I want to come back over to Sudhanshu Mittal in New Delhi. I could see you wanted to get in there. I would like your response to what we've heard earlier. And I'd also like to ask you about the issue of the agricultural reforms, which, as we've talked about before, sparked year-long protests. I mean, Uttar Pradesh has a large rural population, right? So how is that going to play, do you think, for the BJP?
First, the hate rhetoric, casting aspersions on the people of this state, saying they are not educated enough to differentiate. I think it is rather derogatory to people of Uttar Pradesh. Please don't do it. If there is a narrative which any political party unleashes, the people of the state have wisdom to understand what is good for them and what is not good for them. See, people of this country vote for their future. They vote for what they believe is beneficial to them, and they've never voted wrong. They voted against BJP at places. We lost so many elections when they felt that the alternative is a better alternative. So now to say that if BJP wins, then the people of that state are uneducated and so they cannot differentiate, this is absolutely wrong, unacceptable. And please do not denigrate the people of Uttar Pradesh. As far you just said, you just said the same thing.
All right.
No, I did not.
Anyway, now let me come down let me come down to the issue. Let me come down to the issue of agriculture reforms. It was a very ambitious program of this government to do agriculture reforms, which would be beneficial to the farmers of this country, because this country has a huge population of agriculturists. In fact, that's the primary occupation of this country. Now, there are miscommunications and there are communications which led people to believe that these are inadequate laws which may not be good for them. So after trying to persuade the people, when it was seen that they are not getting persuaded and the misgivings continue, we withdrew. That's it. Now, Uttar Pradesh has a lot of huge agricultural population, so has every part of this country. Because as I said, that's the primary occupation of people of India. Uttar Pradesh agitation was largely confined to people in the western UP. And there was a particular community which was particularly incised because of this, because it had its bearing in the politics of Haryana also. Now, this community has also seen the subsequent events after the withdrawal. And when the results will be out, I'm at least happy that both the panelists here are conceding that in democracy, the people have more faith on BJP, and that's why BJP is likely to win.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Anybody?
Now, if we are going to win, we are not going to win because we delivered hate speeches. We are going to win because people thought future is most secured with us,
as you say,
and that is good for their futures.
As you say, people will give their opinions at the polls, and that is the point of elections. I'd like to cross back over to Lucknow. Fatima Khan, I could see you wanted to get in there. Was there something you wanted to add?
No, I think I just want to make it very clear that individuals make the choices that they deem fit. And no one here will come and ever question those choices in terms of whether or not they were made because they're educated or not educated. But everyone has full right to analyze why those choices were made in terms of what was the impetus for them. I just now all day I've been on the field reporting. I have met people who lost their immediate family members, their husband, their son, their parents to COVID second wave. And I had met them earlier at the peak of the second wave too. And they had in so many words said that they're so angry, they're so upset. Even now they maintain that they're hugely, hugely disappointed with the government. But some of them say that we'll still continue to vote for the BJP for so and so reasons, for many reasons being, okay, you know what, this is a Hindutva government, this is a Hindu majoritarian government, and we identify as Hindu majoritarian people, and we identify with that brand of politics, and so we'll vote for them. And that is the choice those individual voters are making. So I think no one's here being judgmental about individual voters, but we will call a spade for a spade, and I hope no one has a problem with that.
All right. I'd like to come over back to you, Thulasi.
This COVID, can I just say something about the COVID?
Very quickly, really because we are running out of time.
Very quickly. COVID is a phenomena which is a global phenomena. And this global phenomena played havoc with the lives of people all across the world, not just Uttar Pradesh. Not only the system collapsed in Uttar Pradesh, it collapsed everywhere. But hats off to the governments of the country, hats off to the people of this country, that they fought back with their inadequacy. When it came to vaccination, they ensured that we have such a huge vaccination program that when this wave came this time, look at the collateral damage, but just negligible. So it is not how you were caught by surprise, because the world was caught by surprise. But once you got aware of what is happening, how you fought back. You fought back with such determination that I salute the people of this country. I salute the governments. The governments include non-BJP governments also. So don't say things which do not merit a logical endorsement.
And as you say, this is a pandemic that has affected the entire world, and nations, populations around the world are voting on their leaders' responses, which I'm sure will be in people's minds at these state elections. We will have to leave it there for time. Thank you to all of our guests, Sudhanshu, Mittal, Thulasi, Kairaj and Fatima Khan.
Thank you.
And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Kim Vinell, and the whole team here in Doha, bye-bye for now.